morning. We're so glad that you've joined us for week 2 of our Easter series entitled Come to Me. This series is being taught by our guest speaker, Matt Gordon, who's joining us again this week. Matt's the Director of Faith and Community at Veterans United. Let's start our morning by worshiping together as the band leads us. If you're in the auditorium, please stand and sing. Woodcrest, Real People, Real Journey starts now.
We words that I sing. You are the reason I make this offering. You are my God and my King. You are the words that I sing. You are the reason I make this offering. You are my God and my King. You are the words that I sing. You are the reason I make this offering. You are Lord on high. And you are the way, the truth, the light. You are the Word made flesh. You are the bright morning star. You are the Lord on high. You are the way, the truth, the light. You are the Word made flesh. You are the bright morning star. And you are my God and my King. You are the words that I sing. You are the reason I make this offering. You are my God and my King. You are the words that I sing. You are the reason I make this offering.
Please be seated, please.
Morning. Just paid attention to that screen, and it said like weary, exhausted, and then lights cue, and it's me. The picture of all those things. Last week we talked, and for those of you who aren't going to go trouble yourself and look online if you missed it, I'll fill you in. Spoke about a key, and then I lost the key, and then I found it. And so I'm sorry if now I broke the server because everyone's rushing to get that talk. Really exciting. That sounds really riveting. But it got me this week thinking about a key. The only reason we have keys is because we have locks. If we lived in a lockless world, we would also live in a keyless world, but we can all admit that we do not live in a lockless world. There are locks on everything because we need locks on everything. And so we have to be thinking about what the locks are in our life, because those are the things that are keeping us out of the good places. They're keeping us out of the best rooms of the house, keeping us away from the places we want to go. Or with Easter approaching, they might be the things that are keeping us from Jesus. Because the other thing we did last week is we talked about Jesus, and we had this beautiful invite that he gives. So he's busy saving the world, and he's healing people and teaching people and loving those around him. And he pauses and he gathers a huge crowd of people like this together, and he says, okay, to my followers and my not yet followers, here's an invite. And the invite reads like this. He said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. There's nothing keeping me from that when I read it. Like, he nails the sales pitch. He's humble. I want to be around humble people. He says that I can learn from it. It means I don't have to have it all together. I can come to him. And then he promises me, in that word rest and that word yoke, he promises me two things that my soul desperately longs for. One is to be part of something bigger than myself and to add value to that something. Two is to have a cosmic sort of sense of belonging, unconditionally. I just belong. I can rest in that sort of security. And yet, I hear that, maybe you heard that last week, or maybe you're hearing that today, be like, oh, the door feels a little bit locked. Maybe it just appears locked and you see it and it looks like a locked door and you walk away. Maybe you even jiggle the handle a little bit. Maybe you go all out and you take the library card out and try and do the swipe thing and get in there and you just can't get in that door. So if the issue isn't Jesus, and I'll pause there for a minute because some people either watching online or here are like, well, the issue is Jesus. That's precisely the issue. I understand people who don't want to follow Jesus. There's a lot of reasons why you might not want to follow Jesus. What I don't understand are the people who hear the name of Jesus and are like repulsed, sick at their stomach, bile rises when they hear that name. And what I think happens, if that's you, is you're not talking about the same Jesus I'm talking about. I'm talking about this suffering servant who came to earth and just loved his friends and loved his enemies and constantly put people before him. That doesn't get bile rising for me. What has probably happened if you instantly sort of get angry at the name of Jesus is you've been foisted a faux Jesus, politics Jesus, or culture Jesus, or I hate science Jesus, or a lot of us get this as like teenagers, judgment Jesus. And all of those Jesuses are great for rallying a crowd or causing a frenzy or fighting for power, but they are diametrically opposed to the Jesus that you see depicted in the Bible. So if the problem isn't Jesus, and the problem isn't this invite, we just read the invite's amazing. The lock actually might be, gulp, you. The lock might be me. And so what I want to do with our time today is just look at 3 quick snapshots of a come to me Jesus approaching someone and offering an amazing invite to them, and them nearly locking themselves away from coming into his presence, his provision, his peace, and his rest. And so we're going to look at a couple scenes out of the book of John. John is one of 4 biographies that we have of Jesus, and it's kind of the most artistic, creative one. And it's great because John, I think, intentionally does this. He stacks these 3 on top of each other, chapter after chapter after chapter, so that we kind of can't miss what's going on here. The first one happens in John 3. There's a guy named Nicodemus who comes to Jesus at night. Easy to remember, Nick at night. Maybe they're watching Mary Tyler Moore, Bob Newhart. There's a joke for the 70 to 90-year-old demographic. That's those last. Everyone else is like, who's he talking about? Well, old TV shows. That's not why Nicodemus was coming at night. Nicodemus was coming to him at night, probably, because he was ashamed of coming to Jesus. He was ashamed to be seen with him. He just wanted to dip his toe in the water. He didn't want to get saturated in all of that. So he was like tiptoeing to Jesus. That's some of you all here. That's some people online where it's like, hey, you want to play golf on Sunday? Be like, well, I got a thing in the morning, but then maybe in the afternoon. We don't say we have church in the morning because we're a little bit ashamed of that. We're not slapping Bible verses on our shirts. And what I want to say, if that's you, that's okay. That's okay. And some people are like, wait, Paul says that I am not ashamed. It's Paul. Paul says that. After seeing a blinding light of Jesus on the road, after understanding the gospel unlike anyone has understood it, after ministering the gospel to dozens, millions of people, yeah, Paul says it then. It's aspirational. We want to be like Paul. But I'm telling you, today, if you're just like, hey, I'm doing the hokey pokey with Jesus. I'm one in, one out. I'm trying to figure this whole thing out. Jesus will take you as you are. He ain't going to leave you there. But he'll take you as you are. And we see that evidence here because Nicodemus comes at night because he's a little bit ashamed. And Jesus is like, come on in. What can I get you? Let's hang out. Let's talk this over. And also, taking you as you are, he takes Nicodemus as he is as a Pharisee. Jesus and the Pharisees don't really get along. What a Pharisee is, if you don't know, it's just like this ancient Jewish ruling sect. It's kind of the people that were in charge. That means some things about Nicodemus here. The first thing it means about him is he is determined. You have to be determined to be a Pharisee. Second thing it means he's powerful. He's got some skin in the game. He's in the room when it happens, okay? He's got some power. The third thing is he's probably pretty smart. In fact, as Jesus and he are discussing things, Jesus calls him the teacher of Israel. So to get it in terms that we understand what Dr. Fauci has become during the pandemic, that's what he was over spiritual matters for the people of Israel. You tune in at night to see what he would tell you to do. You tune in at night to see how you're supposed to act. You would tune into him. He had some clout. And so he comes to Jesus, and this is what he leads off with to Jesus. He says, okay, Jesus, you're doing stuff that no one has ever done. What's the deal? What's it all mean? And Jesus answers him, you got to be born again. You got to be born again. What he's talking about there is you have to be birthed into a spiritual birth to be able to see the spiritual realm. This would be like if you're talking to someone from the 1500s about virtual reality. At some point, you just got to slap the goggles on them. Like at some point, you just have to see. You can't actually explain virtual reality. You just have to put it on, and then you understand. That's what Jesus says. You just got to put the spiritual stuff on, and then you understand the spiritual realm. That's what you got to do. He can't put the goggles on, though, Nicodemus, because his eyes are crossed. And his eyes are crossed because he gets fixated on that phrase, born again. He takes a metaphor literally, and he literally can now see nothing else but the metaphor. He's just stuck on it. He can't see the forest for the trees. He's that guy who's stymied by a locked door and pushes on it and knocks and bangs the shoulder on, doing everything in his power to get that door open except for reading the little sign that says pull. All he's got to do is pull the door open. Nicodemus is locked out by his own intellect. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about intelligence here. There are very, very, very smart people who believe. And there are very, very, very smart people who disbelieve. And there are very, very, very dumb people who believe. And there are very, very dumb people who disbelieve. Intelligence is varied all across the spectrum on beliefs. What we're talking about is correctly calibrated cognition. It's not all the things that you're right about. It's which ones are you right about? Or which ones are you wrong about? I can be right about everything in the whole world, but if I'm wrong about one thing and it's a key important thing, I'm in trouble. Picture it like a tank. I'm not saying like an army tank. We're saying like a dunking booth, sort of, but it's closed. So you're in this tank, and water starts rising from the bottom of the tank. It starts at your feet. This is some people's nightmare, I'm sorry. But it starts rising slowly, and you're just like, there's water filling this tank that I'm in. And you look up, and right up here, there's a button. And around the button, it says, push to drain tank. And your first thought is, they probably just have made it push the drain. Sort of redundant. Everyone knows the tank. They wasted some words there. And then, why is it so high? They should put it like more at eye level, because you could miss that. They should really move that. They should think about that. And I wonder what actually happens if I push the button. Does it drain instantly, and how does it drain? I wonder if someone's actually watching, and I push the button and it activates the operator to say, hey, someone's in the tank, and then they push a button, and then it drains. Or I wonder if it's completely mechanized. Maybe there's some mechanical stuff, and I wonder then how that works. And so I'm looking into that. I'm trying to see some cords, wires. I'm trying to see how this whole thing works. Is it a pulley system? Is it a shaft? What's going on here? And you know what happens? As the questions flow and the water with it, I drown in that tank. And it's not the water that kills me. It's the inability to grasp what matters and discard what doesn't. Looking for answers in all the wrong places, Nicodemus misses the primary question. Does it work? If the button drains the tank, you push the button. And if Jesus does things that no one has ever done, if he heals the sick, if he gives sight to the blind, if he defeats death, if he was somehow there in the beginning and created this whole thing and has a plan for it, and he's going to wipe away every tear, if he can do all of this that I can perceive and so much more that I can't perceive, and then he walks up to me and says, hey, come to me and be my friend, that's enough. That's all I need to know to take that step. We dig for answers to our questions and doubts, and we should. We do that on the other side of the door, but what matters is not that I have all the answers, but that I'm with the answer. Misapplied intellect is a dangerous barrier. It creates this lock for us. And that's what happens to Nicodemus. And then John 4 tees up another lock. And this one, it's noon. Jesus is tired and he takes a break. The fact of where we are in the world and that it's noon and that Jesus needs a break, we can surmise that it is hot outside. And then a woman walks up. The text says woman. You can read that as like demon witch or she-devil, because that's about how women were looked at in this society. All right? They weren't valued. They weren't respected. They weren't heard. There's no hashtag equality. It's just the way it was. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it was. That's just the way it was. They couldn't testify in court. And so if a woman came sauntering up, and I'm a man, it actually lowers me to talk to her. Like, I shouldn't. And if you're offended by that, yeah, you should be. I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying this is how it was then. And so what does Jesus do when the woman walks up? We know what Jesus does. He says, what's up? It's hot out. You got some cups with you. Can I get it? Do you think I get a drink? He starts talking with her, which again, in our cultural context, this is absurd, but then it gets even more absurd if you dig into the story a little bit more. So women are lowly, but this woman is lowlier than lowly women. She's at the well at noon. Do you know what time people go to the well in that day? Like 6 p.m., when it's cool. You only go to the well at noon to be alone. You only go to the well at noon because you are alone. The other women, they would go at 6 p.m., and that was kind of their social time. They'd wash the clothes, they'd get the water, they'd do the things, and they'd all gossip. She can't be part of that because she's the one they're gossiping about. Later, we find out that she kind of gets around a little bit. She's the one on The Bachelor who's there for the wrong reasons, and all the other women, all they want to do is let her know it all the time. That's who she is. She's the town pariah, and I would use a different word, but it would be distracting because we're at church. That's who she is, just a total outcast, and that's why she's there alone at noon. And then you look at Jesus. Jesus, one, people are starting to call him rabbi. Rabbi is a term of distinction. Two, crowds are following Jesus, which means he's sort of a big deal. Three, we already talked about it, he's a man. Four, he's a Jew. Jewish men and Samaritan woman, she's a Samaritan, They're not quite like Bloods and Crips, but they're definitely Sharks and Jets and Cardinals Cubs. There is no affinity here. There is no reason for these two to ever have words at all except, oh yeah, it's Jesus. And his character rises above the cultural sort of casserole that he's living in. And he says, come to me. Not precisely, but that's basically what the conversation is. He's like, here we are, you got the water, we're talking, whatever. Come to me. He has this amazing talk with her where he invites her to have living water. And what he means by living water is basically that her soul would never thirst again. What we mean by soul thirsting again, all of us has the existential angst. We have these intrinsic needs, and he's saying, no. What you're going to have in place of that is joy forever. You're going to have joy forever. You're going to have peace forever. And not just forever till you die. I mean beyond. I mean forever. Living water, that's what I have for you. Once in an existence offer. Blindsiding her, this woman who no one talks to. Now someone's talking, and not only just talking, giving her something that's so amazing for free. And you know what her answer is? Her answer is, well, our fathers say we got to worship on this mountain. But the Jews say we got to worship in Jerusalem. What do you think it is? If that doesn't make sense to you, you're a normative human. Because that response doesn't make sense to anyone. It's a non sequitur about a doctrinal dispute, about where to worship. Once in a lifetime offer, and then you meet it with that. That's like going to Auntie Anne's. It's going to the pretzel shop at the mall and ordering a copy of Voltaire. It doesn't make sense. You order a pretzel, you get the good stuff, the thing they offer you, the thing that's glistening with grease, that's the good stuff. You order that, you put that in your mouth. You don't say, take some philosophy for $500. No, it makes no sense. So what is happening here? Well, what's happening here? Emotions. It's emotions. Jesus, earlier in the conversation, calls her lifestyle into question. He just calls it into attention, which calls to attention everything else for her. Her unhappiness, her malaise, her objectification, her loneliness. Jesus gets in her kitchen, and Jesus is forever getting in people's kitchen, and she has mold and dirt and all kinds of stuff. The kitchen is just a mess. And instead of allowing him to get in there and see that, she points to the window and says, look, a squirrel. She tries to distract because she is ashamed, and shame is forever deflecting. Shame deflects. Some of you have shame right now. When I say the word, you can really think about your shame. What does it do? Right now, it's making you want to tune out everything I'm saying or figure out all the ways that I'm annoying. Why? Because it's shame. It's trying to get things deflected, especially good things. Jonathan Haidt is a moral psychologist. He's also a writer. He does this in a few of his books, but in one of them, Coddling of the American Mind, he says that our emotions are like this elephant, and our intellect and logic is like this little rider that sits on top. Who is controlling whom? Who is controlling whom in that paradigm? Many of us can't come to Jesus because opening one door throws open all the other doors. And we tuck our shame deep, and we mask our way through life. And so when someone attempts to pry in, what we do is we redouble the defenses of protective disbelief and distraction. Brené Brown, another writer and psychologist, she says that vulnerability is the first thing we look for when we walk into a room and the very last thing we want to show in ourselves. It's dangerous. People will weaponize it. People will use it against us. People will make it a weakness. People will trample on us, so we got to hold it close. Don't let anyone too close to us. Here, Jesus looks into the deep parts of her heart, her vulnerabilities laid bare. He sees her weariness. He sees her burdens. He sees her sins, her shortcomings. And he loves her anyway. Completely. Transformationally. After a lifetime of not knowing what acceptance is, naturally, she tries to run from it. But he won't let her. And we'll get to that in a second. So intellect can be a lock for us. Emotions can be a lock. And then we get the third lock in John 5. It's the lock of circumstances. In this case, it's physical. So when we come to John 5, there's this lame man by a healing pool. Some things in context here. The pool doesn't heal people. It doesn't heal people. We know that from a couple clues. One clue is it's surrounded by people that need healing. Oh, if it actually healed people, it would look like Club Med. It wouldn't be a bunch of sick people lying around. You ever go to the gym? You'll see some chubby people, but mostly you see really fit people to make you feel bad about yourself. Why? Because the gym works. There used to be chubby people, and now they're toned people. And that's how this pool would be. If it was really a healing pool, there wouldn't be sick bodies everywhere. There would be some sick bodies and then a bunch of well bodies around. The other clue we get that it doesn't work is this guy has been lame for 38 years sitting by this pool. So what, is he on the 40-year plan? It doesn't make any sense. And so he's just sitting there hoping that something would happen, but it's something that isn't going to happen because this pool, it's a tourist trap. That's what it is. It might give some soothing because you're down in water, but any water would do that. It's a superstition. And so there he is, and Jesus approaches. And Jesus always approaches. Today's Palm Sunday. What does Jesus do? He approaches. Don't go to Jerusalem. It's messy there. There's more people equals more mess. We all know that, right? More people. If you lived alone by yourself, there wouldn't be that much mess. Man, you start inviting other people into your world. Oh, man, these people are terrible. There's mess. And Jesus is like, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm headed. He's always approaching. We don't always realize it, but Jesus is approaching. Even individually, Jesus is approaching. He might be approaching you today. If you unlock doors and see, he might be approaching right now. And so he approaches this man who's sitting right there, and he asks him very directly what he wants. He says it this way, hey, you want to be healed? Do you want to be healed? And again, let's see the guy here. He's a guy who can't walk. He's treated about as well as the dirt he's made to crawl around in that society. That's how they treated someone like this. I mean, he was just nothing to them. He had these terrible circumstances, and instead of looking at the world through the lens of circumstances, the circumstance, what happens? It starts to become a mirror. And you start to see it in yourself, and you start to actually become your circumstances. So he was made to feel unworthy, and he was made to feel not just like crawling in the dirt, he was made to feel like he was actually dirt. He was made to feel bad and undignified. Is that what your circumstances do to you? You have a bout with illness, a lingering malady, a financial hardship, a struggle in a relationship, and over time, what happens? You begin to define yourself as an illness. You define yourself as a lingering malady. You define yourself as a walking hardship. You define yourself as just a struggle to be loved. Jesus approaches, but are we too hyper-focused on our situation that we miss the paradigm shift that he brings to all situations? The man asks Jesus, so Jesus says, do you want to be healed? And then the man gives his answer. He asks Jesus, the creator of all things, capable of doing all things, to lower him into the pool, to drop him into the superstition, to allow some relief, just a momentary feel better. Just give me a Band-Aid for this bullet wound. That's what he asked Jesus for. In this scene, the man was lame, but in this moment, he's also blind. You all probably have friends. In every peer group, there's one friend that just doesn't know where the line is. They just go too far. Like most of us live like in a range of 4 to 7. This friend is always at an 11, right? Does everyone have someone like that in your life? I got some nods. If you're not nodding, you're that someone. So congrats. Hopefully we don't have a room full of that someone. It's going to be wild when we try and leave later. No, my friend, I'll call him Bill. We were friends in college. Bill was a great guy. I remember going to basketball games with Bill, and I wouldn't yell at the other players and refs. I would just whisper things in Bill's ear, and he would. It was like this microphone. I could say anything, and it would just be amplified so the whole room could hear anything. I remember one time Bill got thrown out of a game because of me. It was amazing. Bill would just go for it. I remember another time we were on the soccer team together, and we were running. We had to run 6 miles on a Sunday, and we were just running, whatever, and we came into like kind of a lower income part of town, and there was a dilapidated house on our side as we're running. And then a dilapidated porch, and then there was a dilapidated group of friends, day drinking the day away. And we're running, and they just start yelling at us. And they had every right to yell at us. It's a bunch of strangers in 2 short shorts running through their neighborhood. And so they start yelling at us, and they're saying all these things at us, and they're just letting us have it. And then one of them yells, "Hey, why don't you get a car?" Which is whatever. You just keep running. Not Bill. Bill, mid-stride and out of breath, somehow like stomached up the energy to turn back, scream like Chris Farley as loud as he could, "Hey, why don't you get a new house?" Yeah, They made fun teasingly of our mode of transportation, and he calls them poor. Like, tit for tat, nice, Bill. Another time we had this math test, and the math teacher did this thing where they gave us a study guide, and then nothing from the study guide made its way to the test. And so if you're a math teacher in here, and you don't get anything else from this talk, don't do that. That's the worst. Like, just don't do it. I don't know what happens if it's like a Revenge of the Nerds type of thing where like you get made fun of for liking math growing up, and then now you're the one with the power. You're like, I'm going to mess with these kids. That's what she did. She gave us the study guide, and then we all go and we bomb this test. And so then we come back to our dorm room. There's a handful of us who had played sports together at the school. We're sitting in our dorm room, and even though the tests that we're carrying with us have F on them for us, we're thinking the real failure is our teacher, and we're plotting a way to get back. And so we're just green light thinking here. Someone's like, "Hey, I know someone who works in the cafeteria. We could probably do something to her salad." And then someone else is like, "Hey, she drives a blue Camry. We can let the air out of her tires." "Ooh, we could follow the Camry, and then we could go TP your house." Now, hear me. We weren't actually going to do anything, right? This was just group therapy. You've been there where you're just like ragging on someone. You don't really mean it. You're not really going to do it. And then a voice from the corner pipes up. "We should kill her." Like, one double take doesn't do it. We were all just, "What did you just say, Bill?" He's like, "Green light thinking, right? Like, you guys are saying those ideas, like we should just kill her." And then you could tell he was kind of trying to back it in. He knew he had gone way too far, and we're just like, "Bill, no." And it's amazing. You see the preciousness of life of your teacher when her death is dangled before you. We all turned on Bill so fast. Someone was like, "She is a nice woman." And someone else was like, "She's pregnant, man." Like, we're just yelling at Bill. Bill felt about this big. We were saints in Miss Hively's class the rest of the semester, thanks to Bill. Like, we just sat in the front row. We were so nice to her. We just treated her amazingly. Here's my point. The point is not that we should pipe off at the mouth like Bill did. The point isn't that we should be obnoxious or try and kill math teachers. The point is this: our relationship with God, we should treat it at an 11. Like, we shouldn't tip our toes in the water. We shouldn't tippy-toe around God. What we do with God is sometimes we treat him like a half-measure God when he's a full-measure God. And that's what the people in these texts are doing. They're just stopping short of what God can actually do when they need to, like Bill, throw themselves across the line, like caterwauling across. It's not like I can just barely step over. It's like we need to just dive into what he has for us. We don't need to fixate on the metaphor and miss being born again. We don't need to think he means a mere drink of water when he suggests that we can have living water for our souls. And we don't need to be asked to be lowered into some cultural pool when we can be raised to life. In one of his most famous quotes, C.S. Lewis puts it this way: "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at sea." And this last line: "We are far too easily pleased." That's each of these characters. Just far too easily pleased. We cannot let our petty intellect bar us from the fathomless depths of the mind of God. We cannot let our emotional shame at not being perfect keep us from the author and perfecter of our faith. And we cannot let circumstances blind us from seeing the possibility of eternal healing forever. Beauty is, despite these locks, Jesus meets each of these people where they are, and he continues to philosophically engage Nicodemus. It becomes for him a key of steady change. He just continues to love the woman at the well. He makes her known and seen. And then she goes and she opens up and was seen by others, telling them about the man who told me everything I've ever done. She was no longer bound to her shame. To the guy who has been lame for 38 years, sick and stagnant, he gets to pick up his mat and walk in life anew. Our intellect, our emotions, and our circumstances. Our faith is deep and reasonable. It's chock full of intellect. I don't know if you ever read about quantum physics. About once a year, I'll read about quantum physics for about 5 minutes to be reminded of how stupid I am. It's like, I'll never get any of this. But there's a building block of quantum mechanics, and for people who are pretty dumb, they explain it as a coin in the air. The coin flips, and while the coin is in the air, when it's unobserved, it's equally heads and tails. It's not like one or the other. It's like, and they call that superposition. It's superpositioned. And if you read enough about it, your eyes will end up touching, so I don't encourage that. But when I was reading about it even this week, I was like, dang it, if it didn't take us a couple thousand years to come up with a quantum representation of Jesus, superpositioned as fully God and fully man. The universe just declared it. It just declared it again. So we can look under rocks at worms and wormholes. We should marvel at science because it's all evidence of a God who speaks things into being and holds the galaxies together and yet deigns to invite each of us and says, come to me. Our faith is loaded with emotions, hopes, and dreams and loves. We live in a broken world and we're prone to wander, and yet neither height nor depth can separate us from the love of God. Whether this world accepts me or sends me out to the well at noon, God loves me enough to die for me. And our faith is thrust into circumstances. We're in the world, not of the world, and we're told that it rains on the righteous and unrighteous alike, this deluge of sickness and COVID and job loss and financial woes and cancer and all the rest. But death has lost its sting, and so has all of her minions. We're going to be given legs that won't grow weary, and our existence is not bound to some 75-year, 80-year line, but just a blip, but this line of forever that goes on and on and on. Like Jesus, Easter approaches. It's the culmination of his work for sin, a time when the tomb door is thrown open against the locks of intellect, emotions, and circumstances. The question is, will we see it? There's this church in the South, I don't know where it is. It was in the 90s. They were famous for throwing an Easter pageant. They do it every year. Thousands of people would flock to this church to see this Easter pageant. It was a really big deal. And I mean, they spent all year perfecting it, and they spent a lot of money putting it on. It was their big deal. It was their Super Bowl thing. And they'd have like 5 or 6 performances. So by the matinee on Sunday, that was the big one. Because after the matinee on Sunday, the pastor would come out, they'd roll the curtain, the pastor would like walk out, and then he would land the plane. He'd show everyone, hey, here's Jesus. Here's how you can respond to Jesus. And so they're on that last one. The cast is a little bit giddy because they've been putting in hours and it's about over, so they're excited, and they're just nailing it, right? And speaking of that, Jesus was nailed to the cross towards the end. He's nailed to the cross, and of course, who do they get? It's Jim Jesus. It's like he's got abs, he's got a six-pack, he's just chiseled, he's this beautiful man, Jesus. He's up there, he's 250 pounds on the cross, he's nailing his lines, everything is perfect, and he's just a beautiful man. It's like Jason Momoa, all right? And then it's the part where the centurions get to come out. All right, they're going to come out and they're going to stab Jesus in the side. They're in the back goofing off. They almost missed their cue because it's the last day, but then someone, hey, get out there, get out there. They rush out there and it's great. And they have this collapsible sword and they thrust Jesus in the side with it, part of it. You know, they stab him in the side. And that's when they realized we forgot to switch out the real sword and the collapsible sword. So they use the real sword and thrust Jesus in the side with the real sword, and he starts screaming in agony, and the people in the crowd are eating popcorn, and they've never seen the Jesus story, and they're like, gosh, that did look painful. And then the guy's like, no, this isn't part of it. He's like screaming from the cross. Ambulance has to back up and load up muscle Jesus. Loads him up, but the show must go on. That's why you have an understudy. And so the curtain goes, and it opens back up, and then Jesus is exiting the tomb. It's understudy Jesus, who's an amazing actor. The only problem with understudy Jesus, he looks about like me. He's $140 soaking wet. Great actor, looks different. So people who had never seen this, again, they're eating their popcorn, they're like, wow, what happened to Jesus in the tomb? Someone's like, he lost his gym membership for sure. And they're trying to like figure that whole thing out. But he's doing great. He nails his lines. They're almost done. The pastor's getting ready to close like land the plane, close the deal, all of that. And he's standing there and he's talking to the crowd one last time, getting ready to ascend into heaven. He's telling everyone, go and make disciples, baptizing them, the whole deal, the Great Commission. And then he's supposed to rise gently into heaven to the Hallelujah chorus. Curtains, pastor, done deal. Problem is, he's supposed to rise based on a county weight pulley system that was set for 250-pound Jesus. So 140-pound Jesus looks like a SpaceX launch. He shoots up like he's going to Mars. He ends up levitating, hitting a beam, and he's laying there like Pinocchio, just like, and he's yelling, it's not part of it, it's not part of it. Same ambulance, they just dropped muscle Jesus off at the hospital. They come backing back in, they load scrawny Jesus back in. He goes off to the hospital, and then the pastor comes out, curtain closed, and be like, who wants to come to Jesus? And the popcorn people are like, which one? I kind of like the muscle one, but he's going to recover in time? And then what happened? Like, how did this end? Like, all we saw was the ambulance at the end. Is he still at the hospital? Is that where I go to Jesus? It was confusing. And for a lot of people, this is confusing because you don't actually see Jesus. You see all these different representations of Jesus. You see everything. And this time of year, everyone's talking Easter, Easter, Easter. And to this person who's never seen Jesus, they're like, what does that mean? I don't know, I went to this weird pageant once, is that what it is? Or I had this person tell me this weird thing once, is that what it is? Or my neighbor puts a cross in their lawn, is that what it is? I don't know what it is. So when Jesus says, come to me, he's inviting us to come see the real him. So what that means for you, what I would say if you're willing this week, if you're watching at home, if you're here, if you're willing, first thing I would do this week to see Jesus, read the book of John. You're like, I'm not reading a book, I don't read, it's really short, all right? 3 chapters a day, it's 21 chapters, so 3 chapters a day would get you there. That's like 12 to 15 minutes of reading a day. And you will get to see the come to me Jesus engaging people like the people we talked about. Real people on a real journey, right? You'll get to see him engaging those people, loving those people, living for those people. And then the second thing I would say is if you are going to come back, we're going to talk next week some about Jesus. Paul tells us, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And we just see Christ saying, come to me. What I would say is you go say that to someone else. Come to me, and I'll take you to church. Come to me, and we'll go talk about this Easter thing together. So come back and bring someone, and you just never know for you, for that person, when a tumbler drops and a lock falls open, and you enter into the soothing presence of the real Jesus. Let me pray. Dear God, I thank you for this time. Thank you for this church. I thank you for these people. I pray that we would think through what locks us from your invite, that locks us from you. I pray that we wouldn't settle for a confusing version of you or a perplexing one or get stuck in a metaphor, get caught up in our own shame, or because of our circumstances, we limit you. I pray that we would be the 11 type of people who just run into your arms. When you say, come to me, yep, I'm there. Where are we going? Help us see you clearly this week. For some of us, for the first time. For others of us, the millionth time, but it'll feel like the first time because you are enough every time for us. Let us hear your soothing words today, and let us respond to your come to me. Amen.
Thank you, Matt, for sharing your heart with us this morning in preparation for Easter. At this time, would you join us in preparing our offerings? You can drop those in the boxes as you leave, give through our Woodcrest app, or just text the amount of your offering to 77977. As always, we're grateful for your continued generosity. In preparation for our 3 Easter services, we encourage you to register and reserve your seats. If you or your family are regular attenders here at Woodcrest and are able to join us on Saturday, April 3rd at 6 p.m., we encourage you to do that in order to leave space for guests at our Easter morning services. We're excited to also have a KidCrest experience in the gym on Saturday night, as well as at 11 o'clock on Sunday. Please note Easter Sunday services are 9 o'clock, not 9:15, and 11. Go to register.woodcrest.org to save your seat. April 11th, we're looking forward to the band, The Follow, leading our worship at our weekend service. It's always a treat to have them join us on stage. Be sure to invite a friend and join us. As we wrap up our time together, let's stand and sing. We look forward to a joyful celebration of Easter next weekend.
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, He is my song. You are Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, He is my song. You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. You're never gonna let me down. 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 You are good. Oh, you are good. Oh, you are good. Oh, you are good. You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good. And when the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. Thank you for being here this weekend, and I cannot think of a bigger act. Well, I could think of a lot of acts, but please invite somebody next weekend.
be that personification of biblical hospitality and bring them on to Easter, and let's talk about the invitation of God. Have a blessed week.